I really believe that mothers and children are like a forgotten species in our modern day society.
The job of being a mother, it feels a lot for one person because it was never meant to be for one person.
Exactly.
It was meant for a village.
A village.
Where's the community? Where's the village? Why is nobody helping co-raise my kids with me like we used to?
Hey, bestie. Welcome to the Spoiled Girly Support Group podcast, where we talk about how to get that bag while also securing your own bag. I'm your host, Elle, and let's get into it. On today's episode, we are talking about what happened to the village. Like, where did the village go? Like, why is motherhood so isolating nowadays? Mothers all around the country are in a silent social support crisis, and it didn't used to be this way. In past generations or past civilizations, mothers were able to rely on their village or their community. But today, many moms, especially in the West, especially in the United States, they are raising their children in virtual isolation. And the sentiment that it takes a village to raise a child, it doesn't ring any more true than it does in these times, because we are seeing the effects of the lack of a village on not only the children, but also their mothers, who do not have the support network needed to raise their children. Why are mothers so lonely and isolated? Like, where did the village go? And more importantly, is it too late to bring back the village, or at least a semblance of it in our modern society? Because I'll get people in the comments saying, well, you're not even a mother. Like, a lot of people here are not even mothers. Like, why do you care so much? And exactly, like, why would we not want to create a better world for people other than ourselves? Okay, people who may never be us in the future. Like, if you don't get why we should be supportive of mothers and be aware of the struggles that they are facing and be mindful and anticipating of their needs, then that's you, okay? But that's not us, okay? Bye. Now, we have a lot to cover, but before we get into it, I need you to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you never miss a Spoiled Girly episode. With that being said, let's get into it. First, a history of the village. Before the industrialization era, the economy was primarily based on agriculture, handicrafts, and local trade, as opposed to the large-scale industrial production of the industrialization era. And basically, people were getting their bag as a group activity. And speaking of getting that bag, let's talk about I Love Isla. I Love Isla offers reusable gel press-on nails in a variety of colors, and the beauty about these nails is that you can use them over and over again depending on your activity type and level. And the box comes with two modes of application: the sticky tabs, which can last up to 48 hours for temporary use, and the nail glue, which can last up to 2 weeks with proper application for longer term use. And it comes in a variety of colors, so there's something for everyone. And the ones I'm wearing today are the brown sugar donut glazed, and honestly, it is giving brown sugar donut glazed. Like, I was naming these nails and I just gave them the names that they were giving. And yeah, so brown sugar donut glazed, like, these just look so delicious. And what I like about them is that they don't look like the press-ons that we grew up with. Like, these are the new generation of press-ons where every layer is made with gel instead of printed on by ink. So you really get that salon quality look without the salon visit. And it is absolutely nail game changing. So if you also want to change up your nail game, go to iloveeilashop.com or click the link in the description and use code ManifestL to get 10% off your first order. That's iloveeilashop.com and use code ManifestL to get 10% off your first order. Now back to the topic. During this pre-industrialization era, people organized themselves in small, close-knit communities where social relations are rooted in familial and tribal ties, aka villages. And historically, the earliest villages developed in the ancient Middle East, formed by hunter-gatherers who learned to harvest and eventually cultivate cereals such as wild barley and wheat. And because they were able to grow their own food, there was less need to follow the migration of prey animals or even move when there were changes in vegetation of an area. So instead of being nomads, people were able to settle down and dedicate time to other activities like building their homes and growing their communities and developing a social system where family units became connected and relied on each other for survival. And it's this interconnectedness that formed the foundation of what we call the village. And more than the geographical aspect of like people living next to each other, the saying that it takes a village to raise a child, it emphasizes the principle of shared responsibility and mutual support, which was what these communities operated on back in the old days. And in these villages, childcare wasn't the sole responsibility of mothers. Childcare, along with the other domestic tasks such as cooking and cleaning, was actually a task that was shared among extended family members or even neighbors. So if mom was exhausted and needed to rest, someone else could step in for her. And if she needed guidance, the wisdom of older women in the village were readily available. And basically, parenting wasn't an isolated responsibility, but a collective one. And in many cultures, particularly outside of the West, families still follow this way of parenting. For instance, indigenous communities in Indonesia and Australia, they recognize the value of children having a wide circle of carers in their first 1,000 days of their lives. And interestingly, a researcher who conducted an ethnographic study in a rural community in Madagascar notes how this circle of carers isn't even exclusively older people. Researcher Gabriel Schedecker writes, rather than being linearly ranked in the hierarchy of significance, children's social partners may complement each other by providing different but equally significant experiences. Caregivers focus on children's physical needs and aim to keep them in a calm emotional state, while other young related children are the most crucial partners when it comes to play, face-to-face interaction, and the exchange of intense emotions. Anthropologist Francesca Mezzanzana even talks about her experience of leaving Europe to temporarily live in a small Runa indigenous village where her husband grew up and his family currently live there. In her essay titled Amazonian Childcare, in the eyes of the Runa people, Western kids grow up indulged, overmothered, and incapable of facing outward to the world. And she writes how during the first weeks of their stay in the village, her in-laws and the neighbors observed how she took care of her son, specifically how she was practically at his beck and call. And for them, her behavior was not only bizarre, but utterly disconcerting. And eventually, people in the village started rebelling. And basically, one time she was at the river, she was taking a bath, she came back, and she left her son with her husband. But when she came back, the son was no longer there. And her husband told her, oh, the neighbor took him for a walk. And so she like runs around the village looking for him. But being an anthropologist, she admitted that she should have known better because she already knew that outside populations defined as weird, white, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, children are taken care of by multiple people, not solely their mothers. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate the acronym because why does it have to be self-deprecating like that? Okay. And as a non-weird person, as per the acronym, I can vouch for this because I grew up in a village and I saw firsthand how well it works. Like, I cannot imagine people raising children without a village, okay? And I know a lot of people didn't grow up in a village, so let me spill the tea. Okay, so my village that I was born into, it was huge, okay, like huge Catholic family. And the generation before me, they built their houses right next to each other, like literally a few steps away from each other, or like 5-minute walk. Like they're all next to each other. And I saw my cousins like multiple times a week. And I had a lot of cousins, a lot. Yeah. So childcare, entertainment, pick up, drop off, school lunches, everything was a group activity. Like if you have a problem with your parents, the other parents will counsel you or your parents if they're the problem, you know, which sometimes they are. And if you have a school recital or like any activity or event, like you have multiple people showing up, not just your parents. And like you really just feel this sense of community, like you're never lonely. And especially new mothers are never ever lonely. Like day zero, the mom, the aunts, they're at your house, taking care of you, cooking for you, taking care of your baby. Like literally, you literally just gave birth, okay? So you need to rest. So everything is a family affair. And contrast that with what happens with a lot of moms in the US who don't have villages. A lot of them don't even have their moms or female family members or friends. Like they have their husbands if they're lucky. Okay, that's it. And at your most vulnerable stage in life, you're alone. Like I don't think we're meant to be like that. And it shows, okay? Like it shows in how a lot of women are so tired and exhausted and just overwhelmed by motherhood because they're so alone. Okay, and we're gonna get into that in a little bit. Okay, now back to the main topic, but also related to this subtopic, there is so much research about the positive impact of children growing up with more sources of care, knowledge, affection, etc. Research that spans years and communities all around the world. A 2000 study conducted in rural Gambia found that apart from mothers, the only kin to significantly improve the nutritional status of children are maternal grandmothers. And we talked about this in our grandmother hypothesis class, so watch it if you missed it. In 2019, another study found that having a maternal grandmother between 50 and 75 years of age, while a grandchild was 5 years old or younger, increased the child's survival. And in 2021, a study conducted in China found that children and adolescents living with grandparents even perform better in body health, nutrition balance, and physical exercise hours, with the researchers hypothesizing that because the parents, especially mothers, are able to have more time and more opportunities to engage in work, the increase in household income allows for an improvement in the nutritional status of children and adolescents. So all of this begs the question, if there's so much evidence of the significance of children being raised by a village, why did society dynamics shift? Like, why did the village disappear? Okay. And to answer this question, we need to look at a few distinct shifts in society. And as we mentioned earlier, pre-industrialization villages were self-sufficient economic units with families collectively getting their bag. Okay, they're getting their bag together. It's always like a family business of some sort, craft making tasks, agricultural work. But when industrialization came, it brought about an economic shift where it dissolved these structures where people were collectively getting their bag, and instead everyone was individually getting their bag. They had to get a job individually. Like, factories are not hiring families, they're hiring one person. Okay, so this industrialization, it led to a shift from rural and urban living, and it just completely changed family structures. And here we see nuclear families replacing the extended family as the primary social unit because of, industrialization. So one of the changes is that urban homes, they can no longer accommodate extended families. And also with the growth of the factories, people would leave their rural homes to go work in the city. Because like I said, the factories would only hire like one person, like individually. You'd be lucky if they hired all of you. The opportunities only catered to individuals. So like one person. And so this one person and their immediate family would then move to the city, and it just fractured the extended family unit. And also because the industrial jobs, they gave people individual wages, meaning people were getting their bag individually. It was no longer like collective bag getting. People no longer had to contribute to their family to be able to survive because now they could make their own money. And so socially and culturally, the loss of these extended family structures, it led to an increased individualism. And contrast that with the extended family structures in the pre-industrial societies, they offered more emotional, financial, and caregiving support to its members just because there's more people in the group. And so we see that the nuclear family became isolated from the extended family. And on paper, like, it doesn't sound inherently wrong. Like, a lot of people are so happy that they're not around their extended family. Like, it's messy, it's drama. So I totally get it. But it seems that as societies became more urbanized, like, our social ties just got weaker. And so the generations before us, they got to benefit from having an extended family unit where everyone is providing you financial, emotional, or caretaking support, like everything. A lot of us no longer have that. Like, a lot of people are suffering in this highly individualistic culture that expects people to figure things out on their own. And I want to single out the US because there's such a stark difference in our American values compared to other countries that are still putting a premium on collectivism. And I want to point out, though, that individualism or collectivism isn't entirely good or bad. Like, there's nuance, as with most things. Like, I think a lot of the issues that we are seeing is with selfish individualism, with absolutely zero concern for others, and blind collectivism with absolutely zero concern for ourselves. So we definitely need to find the balance between the two. And another thing I picked up on as to why mothers in the US don't have a village is the rugged individualism vibe. And it's definitely a nuanced conversation because you have to perceive yourself as an individual with some level of agency to create the life that you want for yourself, but also it's okay to want and need help. And this is an observation from someone, me, who grew up in such a collectivist society, is people in the US, like, we don't think that other people need help until they ask us for help. We think that they'll ask for help when they need it and then we'll help them then. maybe. But in a collectivist society, it's a given that other people will need help. Like, they don't need to ask. And if they have to ask, you are rude for not anticipating their needs. Like, that's a failure on your part. Okay? And let me spill some tea, okay? Like, to this day, if my girlfriends come to my house and they ask for tea or water or whatever, like, I find that offensive. Okay, that's not the right word. Like, not offensive, but like attacked. Okay, but it's not their fault. Okay, like, I'm just programmed to find it embarrassing that a guest has to ask me for water or a drink or a snack because I should have already offered that, you know? Like, I feel like,
Who am I? Like, was I raised in a barn?
and the same with childbirth and motherhood. Like, if someone is having a baby, they shouldn't need to ask you for help. Like, you know, they'll be needing baby clothes, supplies, cooked food, help with laundry, help with cleaning, like help in general. Like, they shouldn't have to ask. And this contrast is exactly why so many women talk about how isolating motherhood is and how difficult it is nowadays because of this lack of support. Like, shouldn't the solution be to establish structures that offer them automatic support instead of telling them to ask for help? Like, whatever happened to anticipating needs? Okay. Beth Berry writes in her blog titled, "In the absence of the village, mothers struggle most." The absence of the village is distorting many mothers' sense of self. It's causing us to feel that our inadequacies are to blame for our struggles, which perpetuates the feeling that we must do even more to make up for them. It's a trap, a self-perpetuating cycle, a distorted reality that derives its strength from the oppressive mindsets still in place despite our relative freedoms. And this lack of automatic social support system that anticipates mothers' needs is why a lot of moms feel shame when they ask for help, because they feel like they're not competent enough to raise their kids on their own. Like, you're not supposed to. Okay, you are not supposed to raise your kids all on your own. And if you are doing it all on your own, like, give yourself grace because you are doing something absolutely extraordinary. And speaking of extraordinary, let's talk about how many mothers are simply priced out of their village. And as we touched on earlier, a lot of the mothers don't even have a village because they had to move to areas with lower cost of living, therefore isolating them from support systems. Or they or their partner get a job that requires them to relocate. Like, whatever it is, people are moving for economic reasons. And so when women become mothers, they don't have that physical support system that they once had. And on top of that, with the lack of familial blood-related village, a lot of women with money and privilege can still access a village at a cost. And this comes in the form of paid childcare and professional services. Like, while other women have their own mother or their mother-in-law help out with the house and the baby, some women who don't have that, they could hire a nanny or a night nurse or a sitter. And unfortunately, if you have neither the privilege of having an involved mother or mother-in-law that you have a healthy relationship with, caveat, or the privilege of affording childcare, you're basically out of luck. Okay, and I feel like I'm telling so many stories in today's class, but that's because I did grow up in a village, so I have tea. So here's more tea. Like, you know the trope of new parents who don't sleep? Like, both mom and dad, when they have a new baby, like, they're tired, they're raggedy, like, they're zombies. You know, like, they're just bumbling around, like, oh, I didn't sleep well because I had a baby. You know, like, that trope doesn't exist in Filipino TV. Okay, I cannot remember any TV show that portrays new mothers as raggedy. Like, that's not a thing, okay? Because babies just aren't associated with sleep loss, especially for the mother. And it's because mothers usually have help with the baby. Like, you give birth, your job is mostly done. Okay, just survive. Vibe, period. Like, you are baby too, you know? Like, you're also the baby. And that's just the vibe. And it's so weird that in American TV or American media, like, this sentiment that when you have a baby, like, you're a zombie, like, you're this, like, that does not exist. And obviously it's media representation, like, it may or may not reflect real life, but media representation basically reflects what a lot of people would resonate with. So it's very interesting that in American media, that is how new parents are portrayed, versus in Filipino media, that is not at all how new parents are portrayed. So I really resonate with this vibe that, like, when you have a baby, like, you are baby too, you know? Like, you also need the care, love, and attention. Okay, you also need to be fed and burped. You know, like, mothers should be cared for, especially in their most vulnerable stage of life. Like, no, we don't claim this lack of a village vibe. And this brings us to the psychological toll that mothers experience due to not having enough support, especially after childbirth. First coined by a psychologist named Herbert Freudenberger in 1974, burnout was originally a reference to doctors, nurses, and others in quote unquote helping professions whose line of work left them feeling exhausted and depleted. And given that motherhood is often referred to as the second shift, it is no wonder that mom burnout has become a very real, very prevalent issue among mothers everywhere. So much so that it's even garnered its own term, depleted mother syndrome. And to quote a blog post by Elizabeth Keohan of Talkspace, it's easy to see how motherhood burnout happens since being a mom is hard. Often, your days start at dawn and don't stop until you collapse late at night. On any given day, you might be responsible for preparing meals, ensuring your children are dressed, fed, and entertained, going to work meetings, and keeping the house some semblance of order. There is laundry and shopping to do, bills to pay, emails to be answered, and that's not even everything. The experience is far from unique. It's shared by countless mothers who strive to be perfect. And the ironic and heartbreaking thing is that even though this is a reality shared by so many mothers, so many also say that being a new mom specifically was actually the loneliest time of their lives. For instance, a study by the British Red Cross found that 83% of mothers under the age of 30 had feelings of loneliness some of the time, while 43% said they felt lonely all the time. And another survey also found that 90% of new mothers felt lonely since giving birth, with more than half, 54%, feeling like they had zero friends. And this can, once again, be attributed to how our modern society is structured based on individualism and also as an effect of the macroeconomic shifts that we are seeing. And it's very interesting that in other non-Western cultures, including China, Japan, India, and South America, new moms, they follow post-birth practices that prioritize physical recovery as well as provide emotional support. There was a YouTuber who did a series on her confinement period in China after childbirth. Like, she's not Chinese, but her husband is, so they live in China. And basically, she gives birth, and there's this lady, like a professional confinement lady, who came to her house, like cooked her food, took care of the baby for her, and like made sure that she was resting for the duration of her confinement. And do you know how long this confinement period is? Okay, it's anywhere from 28 to 100 days. Like, imagine 28 to 100 days of being baby. Okay, like, you have to watch the video because it's chef's kiss. Okay, may this type of care find all the moms. And apparently, moms around the world are finding this care. The Guardian writer Lucy Jones describes a few in her article titled "It Felt Shameful: The Profound Loneliness of Modern Motherhood." She wrote, "In Vietnam, the period is called Namo, meaning lying in a nest. In Nigeria, Omugwo is the name of the Igbo cultural practice of postpartum care given to the new mother and baby by her mother or elder female relatives. In Mexico, a closing of the bones ceremony helps to emotionally and physically close the woman's body after the extreme opening of birth." But in the US, what do we have? New moms are often left to their own devices following the birth of their child. Like, you go to the hospital, you deliver your baby, and then you go home shortly afterwards. And you don't want to stay long at the hospital because it's very expensive, okay? In a 2021 study by clinical psychologist Dr. Billy Lever Taylor, a mother who identified as Black, African, and Muslim compared the social support for mothers in her African home country against the lack of it in England. The woman is quoted, "If it's back home now, you know, your parents, you give them to your children sometimes. 2 days, 3 days, they would be with your parents. You have a little rest, but here, there's nobody."
Motherhood is so precious to us indigenous people that it baffles me when I see non-indigenous mothers or women left to fend for themselves, man and babies.
So I wanted to talk about this, about how indigenous people celebrate motherhood more visibly than non-indigenous cultures. And I think it has something to do with colonization, bringing patriarchy into indigenous cultures. And so there's just less of a celebration of mothers, okay? Because now that culture doesn't prioritize the miracle of childbirth, the source of children, which is women, there's just less of a respect for mothers. And that's why we see, as per this woman's excerpt in this article and this comment, like, motherhood is precious to indigenous people. Motherhood was precious to our pre-colonial matriarchal societies. Like, do you see now, like, when things are connecting, like, while we're covering this topic? Okay, let's do a little rant because not a rant, but just like a side comment, I guess. Like, I've been getting comments about, like, why are we talking about these topics? Like, it's so random, this and that. And I'm like, it's a spoiled girly support group, okay? Like, we're gonna talk about topics that involve women, period. That's it. But like a lot of it goes so much deeper than that. Like all the issues that we are having about our existence, our experience of the world, there's always a common theme, you know? And this kind of just highlights that like why is it that in indigenous cultures like motherhood is so valued, motherhood is so celebrated, like mothers are really having the time of their lives. But then you contrast that with modern civilization, colonizer core, you just don't see that as much. Okay, so very, very interesting. And if you factor in the fact that postpartum depression affects nearly a quarter of women up to a year after childbirth, then you can just imagine how bad it is that we are leaving these already vulnerable women alone. And I know that there is a physiological aspect to it, like obviously giving birth causes your hormones to go haywire, like there's a physiological aspect, but can you imagine how much more difficult it must be to recover from postpartum depression without a village? Okay. And Lisa, a participant in the 2021 study by Taylor and her team, recalls feeling a need to be mothered herself when she was on the brink of exhaustion. She shared that she was like a little husk and just wanted to be looked after. But without a village, we are expecting moms to be able to do everything alone. We're not only physically isolating them, but also doing it emotionally and psychologically as well. And the culture of rugged individualism is also making moms feel bad for asking for help when they shouldn't even need to ask for help anymore. Like it should be automatic, okay? People should be anticipating their needs. Do you get what I'm saying? Like we need like a cultural shift. The reason why we're doing this class is to like get into how we can create this automatic social support system that anticipates other people's needs, especially mothers' needs. If you're at that age where the women around you are starting to have children or they're going through like life changes, like can we bring back anticipating needs? Okay. And I feel like I talk about servant mindset all the time. Like this is really what servant mindset is about. It's about being in a giving vibe, in a giving energy, and also giving without being asked. Like it's anticipating needs. Like we need to bring back the village. If we have any hope of doing so, we have to first actually want to have a village, because it's one thing to say that you want a village, but it's another thing to actually fulfill the social responsibilities that the village requires of you as an individual.
I just came across this Slate article. I'm starting to think you guys don't really want a village, referencing mothers nowadays being like, where's the community? Where's the village? Why is nobody helping co-raise my kids with me like we used to? I think a lot of people want the help and the support, but they don't want to deal with actual people. So they just want like people to behave like mindless minions, to behave like they are hired professional help with no interpersonal relationship, when in reality, that is the opposite of a village. So if you expect your village to just show up and shut up, do exactly what you want, how you want it, forget their personalities, forget their lived experiences, forget just human nature, you don't actually want a village then. You also have to take the fact that a village is made of people, and people require effort, conversation, and interpersonal dynamic skills.
Let's get into the comments. Someone said,
I offered to make food and help out with a friend I've known forever. She canceled on me while I was on my way and asked to just leave the food on the porch. Like, why would I want to help again?
like, that is actually wild. Disrespectful, to be honest. Someone else said,
And you have to be the village back, because no village revolves around just one person or one family. The village also requires you to show up for other people even when it's convenient.
and then the creator of the video commented,
Yes, like the whole I don't owe you anything when someone asks for a ride to the airport or has their own hard times. Reciprocity matters.
exactly. And I got asked this question. I did an AMA on Instagram, and someone asked, what if your friends don't align with you and don't reciprocate? And like, number one, those are like the two basic definitions of what a friend is, you know? Number one, they align with you. And number two, they reciprocate your effort. Like, if they don't do those things, those are not your friends. Okay? And I know the no nuance Nellies will say that this is making relationships so transactional, but it's the opposite of being transactional, okay? Like being in your servant mindset and creating community with others by giving, but also being cognizant when people are taking, okay? Like I'm not saying to be like a tit for tat person, because ill, but be mindful that you can't expect people to show up for you when you don't even show up for them, okay? And like I said, today's class absolutely applies to you even when you're not a mom, you're never going to be a mom, or you're not a mom yet, because we are each other's community. We all exist in tandem. So you, as a spoiled girly who may or may not have children, can still create an automatic social support system that anticipates others' needs. And in this case, mothers' needs. Like, you don't have to wait until they ask you for help. Just offer it. Like, just do it, okay? And obviously, to the best of your ability and resources and bandwidth. But if we are ever to create a better world for ourselves, our friends, our family, our children, we can start with ourselves. Bestie, wake up. Also, go to iloveeilishshop.com and use code ManifestL to get 10% off your first order. Thank you so much. Bye.